Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tin Man's Court Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'll be reacting to my second scary storyteller channel for y'all. And this one is Dark Reality. And the video that I'll be watching this time is called 3 Disturbing True Fog Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera back up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag, shall we? Look it up, here we go.
I'm a 17-year-old high school student with a weak body. I live in a small town in the Philippines, and this town is surrounded by rice fields with a highway going straight across it.
Okay.
Part of my usual weekend routine is to go jogging early in the morning, sometime around 5 a.m. My usual jogging route is from my house, somewhere in the middle of town, to a small hill with a wonderful view of the town in the morning. To reach my destination, I would have to jog on the side of the highway. From time to time, a fog that lasts for an hour would appear on the highway, and once you're inside, you could only see 10 or 15 feet before it all goes white.
I remember when it gets foggy outside, I barely even go outside to walk and get my exercise in because I'll have trouble seeing through it, and you never know if a car will be coming down the road with their headlights blaring at you. It'll scare the crap out of you for sure. But anyway, let's continue with this person's story and see what happens next.
So one Saturday, I decided to jog. I invited one of my friends to join me since he follows the same route anyway. We left home at 5 a.m. and proceeded to the highway. As usual, a thick fog blanketed the highway. The cars that passed by had their lights on, and there were several one-ways because of road repairs. My country is currently issuing a nationwide widening of all national roads. As we entered the fog, we decided to jog along the side of the road and passed a couple of roadworks, about 100 meters long each. All was well at that point. We were a bit exhausted, but otherwise fine.
Well, that's good to know. But yeah, I get kind of mad and be like, why do they need to widen roads in our country? But I get it. Sometimes transfer trucks go on those high mountain roads sometimes. But then I can imagine our tax dollars going right into projects like that.
We barely encountered anybody else. And usually there are fellow joggers too. That hill with a view is really famous. Then we came across another roadwork, and we saw this guy crouched down on the asphalt. He was wearing a dirty orange vest and similarly dirty hard hat. We couldn't see his face, but we just decided to ignore it. He looked as if he was fidgeting with something in his hands, so we thought he was just holding a few tools or something. Also, there was nobody there but us, me, my friend, and that guy. The fog was still thick as heck. My friend signaled me to keep a distance from the guy, and I followed him. When we got closer, we heard him humming a strange tune under his breath, which in itself wasn't that weird.
I mean, no, if he's part of the construction team and he's just probably sitting there waiting for the rest of the crew to show up and he's just humming, there ain't nothing wrong with that, but just keep away from him because he don't want to be ignored or he might be a weirdo.
But boy, were we wrong. As we got closer and closer to the guy, he started acting erratically. He stopped for a moment as I passed him. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a regular laugh. It sounded sinister and a little dry. It was really loud too, so it really freaked us out. We didn't increase our speed at that point as we thought he was just playing with us. But he didn't stop. He just kept laughing and laughing, and we knew it was beyond a prank. I can't describe his laugh more than I just did, but trust me, he wasn't faking it. We didn't look back. We were speeding up now as we were starting to see the hill. I was gasping for air, but I didn't know what would happen if I stopped. I just forced myself to keep running, and my friend did the same. He was probably 50 meters behind us when I decided to look at him. He had stopped laughing, but now he was standing straight and was glaring at us. He called out to us in an enraged tone. That's when adrenaline kicked in. I just ran and ran until we reached the hill. In hindsight, I don't know how I was able to push myself that far for so long. When we finally arrived at the top of the hill, we were exhausted. I nearly collapsed on a cement bench and stayed there for another hour.
Okay, I was wrong. This dude is really mentally insane. When you hear somebody start laughing wildly, that's usually not a good sign. Just take that time and run. If he starts chasing you, try to lose him. And hopefully they did.
Like a breath of fresh air, my friend laughed in a more comedic manner, and I followed suit. We laughed the whole thing off while waiting for the fog to lift. When it did, we walked home. I hadn't had breakfast yet, so I was pretty hungry. As we passed the roadwork, we saw the guy in. He was no longer there. The only people there wearing construction outfits were the ones signaling the traffic, but none looked like the man we saw. As I got home, I told my parents what happened, and they said it was probably just another nut job, which was common in my town, that stole a construction outfit. Since then, I never went jogging into a fog again.
You know, that could have been the case too. Might have not been a real construction worker. He probably saw the old construction vest and hard hat and just slipped it on to disguise himself. But then when somebody comes by, he'll just go nuts and chase after people. I'm just glad they got home safe and sound, so let's get to story number 2, shall we?
This happened when I was around 12 while traveling a stretch of road between a large Irish town and a not so large Irish town with my mother and niece,
Okay.
11 at the time. My niece and I were buckled up in the back. My mother was driving, and aside from the fact that the weather was eerie as hell, densely foggy with that almost gaseous drizzle you get sometimes, nothing untoward had occurred. So about 3/4 of the way to this town, still driving in dense fog, we see roadwork signs ahead, meaning all traffic had to squeeze through a gap not much wider than a car on one side of the road. As we approach this gap, my mother practically slams on the brakes. This figure, completely out of nowhere, had staggered out of the fog onto the main road and just stood there, directly in line with the gap.
First of all, I would get annoyed at that whole sitting in like one line until they direct traffic to move, and it's always slow. I get bored. Sometimes my parents tell me to close my eyes and take a nap, and we'll get through this whole traffic jam. But if someone just walks right in front of this gap that they're describing before their car hit them, I'll be like, what on earth is this guy doing? Probably a strange guy that lived out in the woods or something to try to cross the road. I don't know, but that would be creepy to see.
She, we could see it was a woman now, let's pretend her name was Jane to make this easier to type, wanders forward towards the car, looking awfully disoriented. Now bear in mind this is a mother and 2 young enough teens, so she's obviously a bit sketchy about this individual blocking the road and approaching.
Okay, it's not a man, it's a woman. My mistake. But I do agree. I would get jumpy and skittish too if a woman just comes out of nowhere and starts walking towards your car when you got 2 kids in the back seat. I'll be either honking the horn to tell them to get away or see if anybody would notice this and try to help you. But I'll be wondering where did this woman come from?
Her car in a fairly isolated area in dense fog. So Jane wanders around to the side door across from my mother and pulls it open. And I do believe my mother would have locked it beforehand, or kept driving had she expected the woman to do this. But it was just such a sudden movement that none of us really could have predicted it. So Jane sits in the car, this kind of faraway look in her eye, wearing a fluorescent red rain jacket, and places this plastic bag awkwardly onto the floor. My niece and I are exchanging glances, and I recall my mother politely but firmly asking her to get out of the car. So Jane closes the door and refuses, and I recall her saying something like, "No, you have to take me into town," as though it were an obvious fact that she was surprised we weren't aware of. So my mother berates her mildly about wandering out in front of traffic, stating that you'd have to be mad to do so in this weather, and Jane responds with, and I quote, "I know. Not sorry, nothing normal, just agreed." So we aren't far from town, and my mother decides to drive on. We'll drop Jane off, and we'll be fine. So we're driving off, and my mother is again cautiously questioning Jane about what she thought she was doing, with Jane just continually insisting in this blank monotone voice, "You just need to drop me into town," all the while staring blankly out into the fog.
I guarantee it's one of them drug users. Hence why they're staring out the window all the time. But I would have locked the door before she even tried to open it, because then you have a hard time trying to get him out.
My niece and I are obviously a bit spooked, unsure if you all know that feeling where someone is just giving off creepy vibes, like you can't put your finger on it, but something is definitely wrong here. So my mother glances back briefly, checking if we were fine, and we sheepishly confirm as much. But no sooner have we spoken than Jane whips her head around wildly, as if something's bitten her. I kid you not. It looked like she genuinely hadn't even noticed we were in the back seat. Might as well have just been Jane and my mother for all she was concerned. She spent a good 5 to 10 seconds eyeing my niece before staring directly at me for at least as long, fingers grasping her plastic bag, the contents of which I'll never know, her eyes boring into mine, with this genuinely uncomprehending look on her face, as though I had suddenly sprouted wings or told her she was on Saturn or something. So she slowly, eyes not leaving me till her head was fully around, turned back to her listless stare out the front window, and the drive continues as normal, none of us opting to further continue a conversation with her. We're approaching the town in question, in which we don't live, I might add. We take a turn just before the bridge into the town. My mother explains calmly to Jane that we're dropping her at the bridge and she can walk in. It's literally 2 minutes into the center of the town from this bridge, but Jane is furiously shaking her head. No, no, you can't drop me here. Again, it's in that tone as though we're idiots and it's blatantly obvious we couldn't possibly drop her here.
Oh, crud. Think you have a good plan just to drop somebody off to where they could just walk into town and it's 2 minutes from there? They go like, no, no. They want to be in town right now. But I guarantee you that she either got a bunch of clothes in that bag or probably a few weapons. And if you don't do it, she says she might pull them out. Which I hope that don't happen, but I'm just guessing at this moment.
My mother asks why, and in a faraway tone receives, "You're just going to have to drop me into town." I'll mention, it wasn't as though she was being rude with these statements, not intentionally anyway. She just sounded genuinely confused that we were questioning her command to drop us into town. It sounded like she thought we had missed some serious reason as to why we just had to drop her straight in, and she couldn't figure out why. Anyway, rather than arguing, likely uselessly, with Jane, my mother crosses the bridge, drives into the square, and lets Jane go. After a few awkward seconds of Jane glancing around, she grasps her bag against her, pulls the door open, gives me and my niece one final confused eyeballing session, and stumbles out. It's raining heavily now, but of course Jane doesn't put the hood of her raincoat up. She just wanders almost aimlessly off, car door still hanging open. No explanation, no thank you, no voiced goodbye, just gone. Now some of you are likely going to comment that Jane probably had some issues with her mental health.
Probably.
And that's entirely likely. But I'd just like to reaffirm the gut feeling of wrong permeating from this woman. It felt as though she really shouldn't have been there, wandering that lonely road in the late winter evening. And after a brief three-way debate on the woman after her departure, I'll admit it was a cold, uncomfortable, and still faintly eerie ride home the last few dozen miles in the fog. I don't know what brought Jane to that patch of road miles from anywhere that evening. If she was mentally capable of being out by herself, what put her in such a lost and confused state of mind? If she was indeed in need of help, what or who had landed this clearly confused woman in the middle of nowhere? These questions I nor you shall never know the answer to. But I can say for a certainty, Jane is likely still out there, and I just hope to hell that I don't pick her up again.
Well, you might be right. She might have mental issues. I'm probably thinking that going into town, she would find somebody to help her. Or she was probably homeless and looking for a homeless shelter in that area. Who knows? But yeah, that would be kind of rude that somebody just offered you a ride and you didn't say thank you back. They just get out and slam the door. I'm just glad they don't have to deal with this person no more.
It was an average winter day, around 2 years ago. I was 16 and well removed from my encounter with the Michael Myers impersonator, which is a story of its own. Since then, my family had moved down south to Florida, and nothing out of the ordinary had happened to me. School starts at 7:25 where I live, but I had to go in a half hour earlier as I had an AP Chem test. I lived around 30 minutes away from school, so my mom and I left the house at around 6:25. It was very, very foggy out that morning. It was also pitch black out. You virtually couldn't see right in front of you. So we got in the car and began our drive to school. It was so hard to see outside. We went only around 20 miles on a 35-mile-per-hour road because we had no way of seeing around us. Eventually, we got to a four-way stop sign. To our immediate left was a subway, and to our immediate right was a hair salon. On the other side of the stop was a strip mall and a convenience store. From the store's parking lot, we could see a car was stopped and waiting to turn right, the direction we were going. It was odd that he wasn't going, though, because we weren't even stopped at the four-way yet. When we continued driving, he pulled out after us. Creepy, but the viewing constraints took most of our attention. A few seconds after pulling out, he begins to flash his brights at us. We're worried now. He continues to do it.
Yeah, that would be kind of creepy just going to school, but then somebody follows you, starts flashing their lights. I wouldn't stop for this dude. He's probably trying to get your attention so you can pull over and probably rob or kidnap you. You never know what would happen here. But let's just see what they do.
Probably around 20 times in a row. Now we're terrified. We know nothing is wrong with the car, so his motives must be malicious. 2 minutes later, we got to a red light. We were going to take a right at the light, continue down a ways, and then make a left onto the highway, our usual way of going to school. However, Flash Bright was still behind us, still flashing his brights. My mom was going to make a quick stop at the red light and then book it, so we stopped quickly. But before we could turn, the car hit us from behind. At this point, we're beyond every adjective you can use to describe being scared. We turned and sped the rest of the way to my school. Luckily, nothing happened. In all honesty, I'm not sure what this person's intentions were. When my mom got home, we looked at the car and saw nothing wrong with it. We believe he probably saw the lack of visibility as an advantage to harm someone. He tried to get our car to pull over by flashing his lights, and when that didn't work, he tried to forcefully get us to pull over. With me being in the car, I'm now 6 feet-ish, 200 pounds. I was probably around the same then. I don't think anything would have happened, but my mom is 5 feet and barely 100 pounds. The thought of anyone doing anything to her is disgusting.
It's just sickening to think that they were on their way to school, and this guy probably saw her mom. Probably was thinking that if they got them pulled over, he would do some sick stuff to her. Yuck. But thankfully, that dude didn't follow mom's car to where her daughter goes to school at, and didn't follow them home. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more dark reality content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Core channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and that's a wrap. And that's day, y'all.